Hey, I just wanted to say, I'm only here to watch tonight. I'm not on the committee. I think you just kept trying to promote me because you thought I was participating, but I can be in the participants.
And Jenny, just so you know, the way the rules work, if you're a board member, even if you're not a committee member, you can ask questions at meeting. Just if the committee is taking a binding vote, you couldn't vote.
Okay, yeah, I'm just here to watch. I can't even stay for the whole meeting tonight. Thanks.
Hey, Kyle, could somebody move Carrie Vogus over to the panelist just in case she needs to speak tonight?
I think she's already there, Dustin. The link I sent you was a panelist link.
Okay, thanks.
All right, it's 6:32. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Taylor. McGuire. Passalacqua.
Here.
Store.
Here. Pardon me, here.
Summers. Harper.
Here.
Patterson.
Here, and it looks like Steve is here, and then Ms. Taylor also just logged in.
Got it.
All right. Could I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved, Taylor.
Second, Summers.
All right, is there any discussion of the agenda? All right, seeing none, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Taylor.
Yes.
Passalacqua.
Yes.
Store.
Yes.
Summers.
Yes.
Harper.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes. Could I have a motion for the approval of the minutes from the September 8th, 2021 meeting of this committee?
Kyle, I apologize, but if somebody in IT could help, Jim sent me a message. He's having a difficult time getting on. McGuire.
All right, I just promoted him to panelist, so he should be in.
Thank you very much.
So moved, Taylor.
This is Chris Storr, and I'll second.
All right, any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Taylor.
Yes.
McGuire.
Yes.
Passalacqua.
Yes.
Store.
Yes.
Summers.
Yes.
Harper.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes. Now for public participation. Members of the public are granted 5 minutes to make comments. Please raise your hand and I will call on you. All right. Ron Kester.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Ron Kester. I live at 1209 West Oregon Street in Urbana. I appreciate the discussion you started about the need to close the downtown jail. No one on any side of the issue wants the downtown jail to remain open, to my knowledge. I also have to admit some disappointment about the rhetoric related to the county approaching all this as a bare minimum sort of plan. That doesn't fit the facts as I understand them. Let's start by dispelling a myth. There is no such thing as a minimum or maximum when it comes to incarceration. Jailing is driven by policy, not crime rates or criminals. And that policy is set by the state's attorney's office in collaboration with the arraignment court judges. Those are the folks who determine who will be detained while they await trial. How do we know incarceration rates are policy driven? Because the current state's attorney, Julia Reitz, won the office in 2004 based in part on her opposition to over-incarceration. Back then, the incarcerated population routinely exceeded 300. To her credit, Reitz reduced that to 200, then lowered it further through the 2010s. In 2019, 2020, pre-pandemic, the incarcerated population was routinely below 150. Is there any reason to believe the rate can be lower than that? Yes, a number of excellent reasons, starting with the Pretrial Fairness Act set to take effect in 2023, which eliminates the system of money bail outright in the state of Illinois. Data presented by the state legislature indicate that the end of cash bail will lower jail populations by 50 to 70%. It's reasonable to assume that the jail population in Champaign County in 2023 will fall below 100 and stay there. Here's a second reason. Senior Justice Randall Rosenbaum. He replaced Judge DeFanis, who retired from the bench last year. I've seen Judge Rosenbaum on the bench, and I met him several times in conversation back when he was the lead public defender. He has a different conception of justice for Champaign County and might well be amenable to promoting alternatives to incarceration. You should reach out to him. Here's a third reason. The Youth Detention Center, which was built in the 1990s when the public discourse centered on the threat of a new generation of super predators. Champaign County believed that story, spent a ton of money on a specialized facility, and that facility has sat largely empty since then. Why? Because incarceration rate is a function of policy. Here's a fourth reason. The residents of Champaign County overwhelmingly oppose using public resources for the purposes of incarceration. The last time the county board asked its constituents to endorse a jail building plan in 2016, the referendum was defeated by a ratio of 3-1. Is there any reason to believe the will of the people has changed since then? There are other good reasons to believe Champaign County can have a much lower incarceration rate. For instance, other counties in Illinois of comparable size, such as Peoria and McLean, have much lower rates. And in the background is the astonishing transformation taking place at the state level. The state prison system has reduced its incarceration rate by almost half over the last 5 years. That's the sort of progress Champaign County should aim for. I would like to make 3 recommendations that might benefit the conversation about the jail moving forward. First, you should ask the constituents of Champaign County if they want to use public resources for the purposes of incarceration. This should be based on more than anecdotal evidence, more than the opinion of the sheriff and his staff, and more than the policy positions of a prison architect who is lining up for a huge payday. It should be based on a credible survey coupled with town hall style meetings where all sides have a chance to be heard. Second, if you proceed with the notion that additional detainment space is needed, consider alternatives to traditional jail space. As a longtime volunteer GED tutor at the Champaign County Jail, I met hundreds of men being detained by the state while they awaited trial. Really intense experience. The vast majority could have just as easily been housed at a Motel 6. In case you're wondering, a new Motel 6 franchise with more than 100 separate rooms and built to last costs $3.7 million. Low security facilities are perfectly adequate for most detainment needs and cost 10 cents on the dollar compared to traditional jail architecture. Finally, please don't equate the swift approval of a plan with responsible governance. In fact, the most responsible thing you could do would be to use the current financial resources to promote policies that everyone knows reduce incarceration, employment opportunities, educational assistance, substance abuse treatment, and networks of mutual care. Then in 2023, after the Pretrial Fairness Act has demonstrated the county's true jailing needs, you can return to the issue with accurate information in front of you. That's 15 months away. Thanks for thinking this over.
All right, next, we have Benjamin Beaupre.
Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Beaupre. I'm a citizen representative on the Champaign County Reentry Council, but tonight I'm just speaking on my own behalf. The previous speaker made some good points about what could be the possibilities if Champaign County really commits to services and programs long before the criminal justice system is involved in someone's life. I don't think we're there yet. I'm far more cynical. It doesn't mean he's wrong about any of those things, and he should be taken seriously about what we could do to actually bring the numbers of incarcerated people down and actually treat people who need treatment before they become criminals, before they make mistakes, before they have a mental health crisis that gets people hurt, including themselves. Now, I'm in support of consolidating the jails. Not happy with the bare minimum plan, but at this point with the downtown jail, I've seen the safety reports. I've been following the reports for years now. That is a disaster. The staff and the inmates are in danger in the current situation. It is untenable. And that is a problem that we are facing now. I'd like to see something better in the future, but I just don't see that happening in the current political environment, and that it hurts to say that. At the last meeting, people were talking about grievances for where the money might come from, and well, it doesn't really matter where the money comes from because people's lives are in danger, and we have to do better. If we're going to run a jail, we have to do it right. I mean, these are people's lives. These are employees of the county. These are our brothers and sisters. These are our kids when they get in trouble. We can't put them in danger like this. So it has to be done. You need to find the money. It might mean having to do a compromise that everybody hates. People didn't like wasting all the money on the nursing home, so they feel betrayed. And that's fine. There's a lot of grievances to go around. Taking money from ARPA technically it qualifies, so it's an option, and it's a life preserver for some folks, but folks are going to feel betrayed by that too. You have folks who have been part of the vulnerable communities here for generations, getting bypassed, dealing with overt segregation, dealing with county state's attorneys, county sheriffs who were active members of the Klan starting in the 20s, all the way to today, where we still have segregated neighborhoods and the ramifications of the white tenant agreements and sundown towns. There is a lot of grievance to go around. You don't have to go too far back to find the shacks and shanties without plumbing right here in Champaign-Urbana. People being neglected while other communities were being invested in, and we can see the results of that. So taking money that could be going to programs and services for them will feel like a betrayal. I guarantee it. But this jail consolidation plan has to be done. And if you have to get the money started there, it has to be. But if you've taken from those ARPA funds, really have to consider where else you're going to get the rest of the money, especially if you're going to go beyond the bare minimum, which in my opinion you should, because that's the need. You're going to have to tax, and everybody hates it and nobody likes it. But if you want a jail with safe prison guards or jail guards, sheriff's officers, if you want safety for the inmates, safety for the county employees, you're going to have to spend some money. And if you take it from folks that are already just run over by the disparities we created with overt segregation, and then upheld with colorblind laws that just reinforced the status quo ever since. I mean, people are going to be upset. They're going to be furious, and they're right to be. This jail might need to be built and consolidated as planned, but if you're going to start in with the grievance talk about, you know, the county taxpayers feeling betrayed, there is a whole history here of grievance that you don't even want to start opening up that can of worms. This jail needs to be built, approve it, find the money, and we'll have to deal with the consequences. But, you know, we should be looking towards Ron Kester's future and getting programs and services before anyone actually gets into the system, addressing the systemic racism that led us here in the first place, dealing with the results of mass incarceration, not funding it with the money that should be going to addicts and mentally ill folks that didn't ask for this. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Next we have Micah Mcmahon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to be brief. I've spoken to most of you numerous times, and I do appreciate your time. The last 2 speakers actually hit on some really good points, and but I do want to point out, I think it's a priority that the public be educated on this. This is something that has to happen. The jail consolidation. We're not building jails. We're just consolidating. We're rehabilitating the space that we currently have to make it safer for both the inmates and for the staff. I currently work with that every day. And I think it's very important that the public understand what is happening and that this take place. I hear a lot of speak about the bare minimum. I think that would be a huge problem for the county if they go for the bare minimum. The bare minimum will not solve the problems. The bare minimum will just push the problem along. I ask that the county board consider measures to go beyond the bare minimum. By getting this jail consolidated, by making this space safer for both inmates and for staff, it will allow the county then to focus on the programs, to focus on ways to keep people from coming to jail. And I believe that's the important factor. The county is mandated by state law, state constitution to keep a jail operating. That is a priority. I think to get that fixed, then you could focus on the other issues. And that will definitely be a priority after that. But at the moment, I could say for a fact, our booking area is packed. It's a daily occurrence where we have to find ways to keep the inmates safe and the staff. And I think it's definitely a priority that something be done as soon as possible. Again, thank you for your time. I know everyone here has been putting a lot of effort into this, and I do hope that we can find a solution sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. There we go. Dottie?
Good evening. I sent a graph that I was asking that be put on the screen. Can that be done there? Darlene said she'd given it to the tech people. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Again, thank you. My name is Dottie Vurawise, and I've been living here in Urbana since 2013. And when I came, there already had been a visit by the National Institute of Corrections that made recommendations that the county change some of the policies so that there would be more community sanctions and community service as sentences for people serving time in our jail. As you can see by the graph, there was a decrease from 250 people in the jail in 2012 to 163 in 2018. That's a 34% decrease over that time period. There were other studies that made recommendations for how to improve the response to crimes and how to prevent it. In 2014, there was both a consultant's report from the Institute for Law and Policy Planning and also from our Community Justice Task Force. And then again in 2017, the Racial Justice Task Force made more recommendations. And finally, in 2017, there was a Bail Reform Act that made some changes to bail that further that began to decrease the people that were being kept for just financial reasons. We also are expecting that the Pretrial Reform Act, which goes into full effect in 2023, will be making more changes that will decrease how people who are arrested and some for those who are convicted, but mainly the ones who are arrested are treated because they are legally innocent until they're proven guilty, and they, by Supreme Court ruling, should only be held in restrictions that are the least possible restrictions to prevent them from failing to appear for court dates and from creating problems in the community by criminal activity. I shouldn't say additional when they haven't even yet been convicted. So right now we've had an increase that we're all aware of over this past year. And a lot of it has been due to the pandemic and all the social stressors that are impacting people and a lot of acting out behavior. And in addition, the court has had to pause its activity several times so that people were being kept pre-trial in jail for longer periods of time. We have for years had a high proportion of the people in jail being people who were still awaiting trial. Today, it is 93% of the people that are in the county jails now are pre-trial. And if you include the people who are have been sent to other county jails because of the needs for repair at our facilities, it's still 74%. And so that's 74% of people that are in jail taking up space that don't necessarily need to be there and that these other programs might have an impact on. I wonder if all the recommendations, all the good recommendations from those various studies had been implemented, where we would be, whether we wouldn't be at a much lower number of people in jail that could be accommodated and that only repairs and rather than the extensive repairs that are now happening and anticipated or needed. I'd like to express my support, though, for the absolute need to close the downtown jail and to renovate to the extent that it's needed for the satellite jail to be a safe and useful place for the individuals to be in. And I want to agree with previous speakers who said that prevention of crime is the best solution. This involves improving opportunities for education, job training, behavioral health resources, and other means of supporting families through the time of the pandemic. Ideally, this should be done in the community, but if people are in jail, there need to be programs for them and there needs to be useful space that they can have those programs in. Renovations to the satellite jail wouldn't be completed until about 2025, according to Mr. Reifsteck's comments at the last month's meeting. We need to take other steps now that can help the county's many communities and begin to have a beneficial effect on decreasing the number of people that are brought to jail. I don't know the exact criteria for using ARPA funds. but I doubt that the majority of the cost of jail renovation would fit them, even though we could try to get a square peg into a round hole and fit it in that way. Well, I believe that counties should act on consolidation and necessary improvements. I believe using most of the ARPA funds to provide family supports and education and job training and similar activities should be the primary focus, as their impact will begin sooner and can lead to more lasting changes that will continue to strengthen our community in so many ways. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, looks like that is, there are no more hands up for public comment. Moving on to the next agenda item, we have communications. Are there any committee members who have a communication they'd like to share? Mr. Pasalakwa?
Thank you very much. And I apologize for no video, but I'm struggling with bandwidth here. I have a letter that was sent out. The gentleman was a little disappointed that he couldn't get a response from the officials in his district, but he did go on to say that he's aware that we are trying to administer $41 million in federal funds. How should it be spent? The downtown jail and satellite jail facilities are not how I would prefer to spend the money, but it is woefully apparent the failure to address the problem will not only make it more expensive in the future. I'm sure you know the number from 32 million in 2015 study to 47 million in a 2019 study. Waiting for the next committee report abrogates responsibility. Some large fraction of the 41 million should be allocated to the jail. There is a real possibility of a lawsuit and a consent decree or a lawsuit for wrongful death. Both of these litigations could be very costly. There is a sorry history of the costly results of inaction with the county nursing home. Do not repeat this failure. Thank you for your consideration of this matter. Regards, Paul DeBevick, Urbana, Illinois.
All right, are there any other communications from committee members? All right, seeing none, we're on to new business. 7A is funding options for satellite jail, discussion only. Tammy Ogden is here. We also have Elizabeth Hennessy from Raymond James, our bond counsel, and then also Kathy Larson, who is our ARPA manager.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. I am joined by Elizabeth Hennessy, who serves as the county's municipal advisor and is an expert on the county's debt. Elizabeth and her team assist the county with meeting our continuing disclosure requirements. They've been instrumental in several of the county's refundings, generating savings. And Elizabeth is also extremely beneficial for me as an asset when we get that contact from Moody's asking us to respond to our financial position. So I am glad that she is able to join us tonight. And we are going to start with a brief market update. I realize this isn't a finance committee meeting, but our discussion tonight is relevant. And so I've asked Elizabeth to open up this presentation by giving a brief update of the market. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you all for having me tonight. Briefly, the bond market has some of the lowest interest rates in history and has over the last year. It's been very stable. This graph shows the AAA Municipal Market Data Index for 30-year, 10-year, and 1-year bonds. And the blue line is the Treasury bond. And you can see since 2019, interest rates started to come down. In March of 2020, we had the massive selling brought on by the pandemic. And since then, rates have been very low, hitting an all-time low in August of 2020. And we've had a little upward pressure from inflation. As of late, it's certainly affecting the taxable Treasury bond market more than it is the municipal bond market. If we go to the next slide, That is because there's a huge demand for municipal bonds. This slide shows what we call municipal bond flows into the market. When there's a green bar above the line, that means there are more buyers of tax-exempt municipal bonds than sellers. When the red bars go below the line, as they did in March of 2020, as we realized we were truly in a global pandemic, there was more selling. So just wanted to let you know, it's a great time if you have to borrow to go into the financial markets. If we go to the next section, we're going to look at the outstanding bonds the district has. Let's see if you can go to the next page. Perfect. The 2019 debt certificates, 4 more years to pay those down. Those were originally issued in 2010 for the Art Bartel construction. The rest of the bonds are payable from the public safety sales tax. These are called alternate revenue bonds. So the alternate revenue is in fact that public safety sales tax, which is pledged to the repayment of this debt. First, we have the 2016 bonds, which refunded the 2007A bonds. And then we have the 2014, those refunded the 2005B bonds. And then the original 1999 bonds, which paid for the courthouse and the juvenile detention center. Okay.
So on this slide, I wanted to point out a couple of things. The 1999 bonds are maturing at the end of next year. However, the county really won't realize any capacity for those dollars because in 2023, the principal payments on the 2014 issue will kick in. And speaking of the 2014 issue, that issue is callable at the beginning of 2025. And Elizabeth and I have already talked about pursuing refunding of that issue at the end of 2024 if there is sufficient net present value savings to support that. The debt certificate, which is in the first column, is actually paid from the general fund, and that is the pledge of the county's 1 cent sales tax revenue.
Perfect. Thanks, Tammy. This graph shows the debt service payable from the public safety sales tax. These bonds are going to be paid off in 2028. The blue bars are the principal, the yellow is the interest, and 43% of the public safety sales tax revenues are appropriated to pay for debt service.
And so the remaining public safety sales tax revenues are going towards operations and programs. Those would include jail classification, the Youth Assessment Center, and the reentry program. In fiscal year 2022, you know that we also, the board directed that the surplus that was available go towards housing inmates out of county. And one of the things that I want to point out before we move on with the presentation is that the county's legal debt margin at the beginning of 2022 is actually $265 million. So we have plenty of capacity to issue debt. However, our issue has been the ability to pay for additional debt service with current revenues.
Okay. This chart, let's start on the right side. We've got the fiscal year. The public safety sales tax for 2021 was $5,637,000. We've assumed going forward and consistent with budget that the sales tax would increase 1.25% annually. So that is our total pledged source of revenue for debt service for the bonds. The outstanding bonds, as we mentioned, were for the courthouse and the juvenile detention center. And those mature in the year 28, and the payments range from $2 million to $2.4 million. So they're almost paid off. The next column shows public safety operating expense, and this is per the budget in 2022 and is projected to go up by 2.5% annually. And then the remaining public safety sales tax is available to pay additional debt service. And what we show on that final column is the net coverage ratio. That's the net revenues after paying operating expenses that's available to pay for debt service on bonds.
And so this is actually some new breathing room that the county got with implementation of the level the playing field legislation. So we had not seen this kind of additional capacity until fiscal year 2021. And that $959,180 that you see there as remaining for 2022, that actual dollar ended up being $977,000. And as I mentioned earlier, for fiscal year 2022, that was directed to the sheriff's budget to pay for housing inmates out of county next year. And so now moving into the discussion about some of the funding scenarios available to the county, I just want to preface this part of the presentation by saying that just because some of these funding scenarios are presented tonight does not necessarily mean that they are practical or recommended by administration. The scenarios that we're going to show you are only looking at a $20 million jail project because I know that is currently a project under consideration. And none of these scenarios will include addressing the sheriff's office needs, demolition of the current facility, other public safety needs such as the justice case management system, which we know could cost upwards of $15 million. And also the cost of housing inmates out of county in future fiscal years, particularly 2023, as construction would be occurring and possibly even into 2024. So the three funding scenarios that we're going to focus on tonight would be alternate revenue bonds. And as you heard previously, this is the mechanism that the county has historically used to address construction and maintenance of its facilities. Referendum for general obligation bonds and utilization of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. For alternate revenue bonds, the county is required to have a minimum of 1.25 times the debt service coverage ratio of the pledged taxes. And alternate revenue bonds are backed by the general obligation tax levy. The county abates that levy annually in February because we are using alternate revenues to make the debt service payments on those bonds. These are attractive to buyers because they are backed again by the general obligation tax levy, and they also have the county's general obligation bond rating, which for us is a AA2 rating. Alternate revenue bonds do require a petition period and also a public hearing prior to issuance. Payment sources for the alternate revenue bonds would be the use of existing public safety sales tax revenues, a referendum asking voters to approve an increase to public safety sales tax revenues. That can be done in increments of 0.25%, and also asking voters to approve a new facility sales tax, which also could be done in increments of 0.25%. Either one of those last two options, if implemented at 0.25%, would generate an additional $5.7 million annually. The next option for funding would be a referendum for general obligation bonds, and this would be a tax levied on taxable property. And Elizabeth checked with bond counsel, and Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, but this repayment would be required to be done over a 20-year period.
Yes, that would be the maximum.
And finally, also the use of American Rescue Plan Act funds under the interim guidance. It is believed this project would be eligible as a capital investment in public facilities that respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. So the next two scenarios that we're going to look at, scenario 1A and 1B, would look at the use of the county's current public safety sales tax revenues in conjunction with the issuance of a $20 million alternate revenue bonds. The first scenario would be repayment over an 11-year period, and the next one would be repayment over a 20-year period. So Elizabeth had mentioned earlier that the assumptions that we're making are that the public safety sales tax revenues would increase annually by 1.25%, and that the operating expenses would increase annually at 2.5%. And again, we really just want to focus on the far right two columns that would reflect the remaining public safety sales tax available to meet the county's other public safety needs, and also the net coverage ratio on the bonds. So you can see in this scenario that the net coverage ratio is 1 time, so does not meet the minimum required coverage of 1.25 times, and also leaves 0 remaining public safety sales taxes to address the other needs of the county. In particular, just looking at fiscal year 2023, if we were going to pursue a construction project, there would not be any capacity for us to continue funding to house inmates out of county. We are not addressing the sheriff's office, demolition of the current facility, or other public safety needs such as the justice case management system. This scenario, again, is issuance of $20 million in alternate revenue bonds over a 20-year repayment period. And looking at the far right two columns again, you can see the net coverage is just under the minimum requirement of 1.25 times. And there is some capacity for remaining public safety dollars to be used to address other public safety needs within the county, but it is a very small amount considering all of the needs that the county does have. The next two scenarios, scenario 2A and 2B, would look at an investment of $10 million of ARP funding and issuance of $10 million in alternate revenue bonds. With this first scenario, looking at a repayment over an 8-year period. Not an ideal scenario. Again, if you're looking at the far two right columns, the net coverage ratio does not meet the minimum requirements, and there is no remaining public safety sales tax revenues to address any of the county's other needs. This is again a 10 million alternate revenue bond with repayment over 20 years in conjunction with a $10 million investment from ARP funds. And we are in a better position here. There is more capacity. We are just over the minimum coverage requirements, and there is more remaining public safety sales tax dollars available in the near term, still somewhat limited, considering the things that I have been repeating over and over, which are needs of the county in the near term. This scenario looks at a $15 million investment of ARP funds and an issuance of $5 million in alternate revenue bonds structured over a 10-year repayment period. The net coverage ratio on the bonds does exceed the minimum requirements of the 1.25 times, and the remaining public safety sales tax dollars are at a higher level, giving the county the ability to address some of the near-term public safety sales tax need or public safety needs. And you can see in all of these scenarios with the current debt maturing in 2028, there's additional breathing room after that period. And we have summarized these scenarios in this slide. Just for me to go over quickly, I began this presentation saying that some of the things that were presented tonight as options are not necessarily practical or ideal. I would definitely categorize the first three, scenario 1A, 1B, and 2A, as not ideal. They do not meet the minimum net coverage requirements for alternate revenue bonds and do not leave the county any or very little capacity to address our public safety needs in the near term. The last two scenarios, 2B and scenario 3, give us more capacity to address some of the county's public safety needs, but we need to continue to have more discussion and planning for those needs so that we can incorporate those into any future scenarios that this committee or the county board would like to see as we work through this situation. That concludes the presentation. And so I guess, Mr. Patterson, I would hand it back to you.
Thanks, Sammy. Ms. Hennessy. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Storr?
Thank you. Ms. Ogden, the scenario 2B and scenario 3 do not really provide enough money, don't provide sufficient funds for some of the proposed modifications, or am I mistaken?
So you're talking about, I'm backtracking here. This scenario here, 2B and 3.
Yes, I was looking at your summary slide.
Okay. Well, I'll keep this 2B up first. And yes, there are significant public safety needs in the near term that are not included in this scenario or any of these scenarios. And as I stated, those would include addressing the sheriff's office, potential demolition of the current facility, the justice case management system, housing inmates out of county during a construction project. So there is definitely more breathing room to do those things in scenario 2B and in scenario 3, but it will be very challenging to do so. I mean, just looking at this example here, you can see 2023 remaining public safety sales tax revenue is just under $900,000. We know that would probably, that whole amount would probably go to housing inmates out of county. If we were to undertake a construction project, it most assuredly would not be done until at least the end of 2023. So, you know, again, that is why at the end of the presentation that I indicated that we would really need to take into consideration the other needs of the county in structuring this, because we want to make sure that we are not leaving those things out. For the justice case management system, we obviously don't know what that's going to look like yet. We are undertaking a study next year. So it's possible that may result in a separate debt issue on its own, depending on what it looks like. Or it's possible that it might be able to be financed by the county, for instance, if it were a software as a service project and we're at a more manageable equal level over a period of years rather than requiring a large upfront investment. But you are correct. There is, in the near term, there are limited available remaining public safety sales tax revenues to address all of those things, again, in the near term. And here's the scenario 3, which has the most capacity to address our needs.
All right, does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Pasalacqua?
I'm not exactly sure who can answer this question, but are we assuming that when construction starts on the satellite jail for the improvements, that we will have to relocate every single inmate, or will there be undisturbed areas that can maintain an operation through construction phases?
This is Tammy. I think that would probably be a question for Sheriff.
Hi, everyone. So Carrie can chime in if she needs to as well. We honestly haven't gotten that far, but I do see a scenario where the majority of inmates at the satellite jail could stay at that facility while there's new construction happening. And again, I'm just thinking off of the conversations that we've had in the past, because this will be, if you've seen the blueprints, this will be not necessarily renovation to the existing space, but new space for a consolidation. And so in my opinion, that shouldn't affect too much. But again, that's not necessarily having any evidence to back that up.
No, I think in most cases, the plan, Brad, was specifically for them to build these housing units so that we can move the downtown facility and the downtown inmates to that part. And then as far as any renovation that goes on inside the satellite, we should be able to move people around, hopefully, without having to move people out completely.
That was kind of my train of thought as well. And thank you for clearing that up. I just couldn't see a construction project that is a renovation requiring everybody to be housed out of county. And that's very promising. Thank you all very much.
Welcome.
I see Dana and Darlene. Do you have input?
Yeah, this is Dana. I would concur with Carrie's thoughts and the sheriff. As we discussed, the majority of the work to be done at the satellite is new work to be done. There is some remodel to the old, but the new stuff would be built, and current inmates could stay in their current location and should not be impacted greatly at all. So.
All right, does anybody else have any questions or comments? Mr. McGuire?
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. So Dana, can you address the schedule of engineering and construction that we discussed earlier, and the need for ARPA funding or funding in general by the end of 2022, please?
You sent a question, I think, to the sheriff, and sheriff forwarded it to me. Not so much about funding, but about schedule. And I sent back a response. Basically, this is aggressive schedule, but if the county board would approve something for consolidation efforts and approve contracting with architect engineer in November, we could be under contract by the end of December or January with our current architect engineers under contract. We'd have to negotiate the fees, but in a 9-month period, you should be able to put together design documents, construction documents, which would mean come fall of 2022, whether it be in September or October, you could bid out the work. You would have a price for it by end of November. Construction could start in 23. An aggressive schedule, yes. Construction could take 12 months, could take a little bit longer. Frankly, a lot will depend upon the supply chain and where materials and what materials need to be procured and how long it takes to get those materials. Could drag out possibly the construction schedule. Just a lot of unknowns at this time. But obviously, if the county board moves forward, this could get moving pretty fast.
I continue with my questions, Kyle.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Obviously, I think a lot of people feel like this consolidation from some of the comments tonight should be our highest priority with the violence and shootings in the community, the need for classification, separation, even just the wear and tear on the staff and the people that are in the jail. With that time schedule, can we accomplish bonding and have the ARPA funding available due to the $15 million or $10 million per project? What is the schedule for it to make sure? Because saying we're going to do something and actually having the funds to do it, were obviously two different things. Will it meet? Will that money be available for that construction? Can Tammy or someone address that, please?
As you know, we've already received the first tranche of our funding, and I believe the second tranche is expected to be received in the spring of next year. What has been presented tonight in terms of debt issuance would look at issuance of debt at the end of 2023, or I'm sorry, 2022, beginning of 2023. And we would have that, a funding available fairly immediately to be able to proceed.
Right, and just this is Elizabeth too. The process for issuing the debt is going to take about 3 months. So depending on when the county board makes a decision to move forward, it'll be 3 months after that to issue the debt.
Does anybody else have any questions?
If you're going to wait for, that's fine. If someone else has a question. I was just going to mention the, obviously the number 3 puts a least amount of pressure on the budget, Tammy, with $15 million worth of ARPA funds.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
All right, does anybody else have any questions? I guess the question I have, when it comes to the using ARPA funds for a project like this, are there limitations based on what ARPA funds need to go to, or are we in the understanding of what might qualify and what might not, or are we in the understanding that everything with this project would qualify?
I think Kathy Larson would be the most appropriate to speak to that question.
So regarding this whole project, it would have to demonstrate that it's responding to the pandemic. And if that's not the case for the whole project, we could look at parts of the project. So for example, if there's drainage or sewer aspects of the addition or renovation or anything involved, we could look at those aspects. If there's services or capital costs to the facilities that will be responding to the pandemic. Changing the facilities in order to respond to the pandemic, or changing services or adding services. We would need to break it down into those specific categories. So overall, it would need to be broken down probably.
Mr. Pasalakwa.
My understanding from earlier conversation was that it's a capital improvement and that it qualifies. So all those small parts make up the project. I'm not sure that it wouldn't just be seen as one project. So I don't know, maybe she could elaborate on that a hair more.
Arlene?
The issue is the specific things that you want to build. So at one point in time, we were considering whether or not the jail would qualify, or potentially the sheriff's office pieces. So I just picture, for example, the jail, we're trying to separate inmates better. We're trying to provide more, maybe, I don't know, classroom space, whatever we end up doing would be ways of separating people better, and they would qualify under the ARPA rules. If we were going to build the sheriff's office, some of that might qualify because we're spreading the staff out, we're creating barriers for safety, those kinds of things. But maybe, for example, the armory space probably wouldn't qualify. That's not really separating anybody. It's not really related to COVID. It's just it's something the sheriff needs for his operations. So it's that kind of a decision that you would make. And probably, I would say, the whole project, or nearly the whole project for the jail part of that, would probably qualify. The other piece that you're talking about, Brad, is that there is a section in the COVID ARPA money that says you can build infrastructure, but you'd have to use what we would have is decreases in our revenue for our county. So we don't expect that we're going to be able to show that. And so we don't have those kinds of things available to us to provide other county things that we might need. The other possibility, however, is that we do potentially have some interest earning capability. We are doing that as we speak, earning some interest on the money in the bank. It's not a huge amount, but it could end up being several tens of thousands of dollars, in which case those could be used for whatever we want to use them for. We don't have to make the interest be going to anything. We could use it for whatever we want to. So if there was a small piece of the project that didn't qualify under ARPA, potentially we could pay for it. If it's a small part, we could still pay it out of the interest we're earning. And then there's also county money. Of course, we have the county operating money that is in the general fund that could potentially cover some of those pieces. But I'm expecting at this point, from what Kathy and I've talked about, that probably the jail project itself would pretty much entirely qualify, depending on what you all decide you want to put into it.
Well, at this scenario number 3, which looks to me like it's targeted at the bare minimum $20 million number, our proposal is 15 million of ARPA funds and 5 million in bonding. So a 75-25 split. Do you feel like the 25% split would cover the non-qualifying parts of the project under the ARPA guidelines? Thanks very much.
Mr. Harper.
First of all, I need to apologize. I missed the first meeting, been just a tad bit busy out here. So I don't know how we came from wanting to spend 20 million on ARPA down to 10 or 15. But to me, we're missing a perfect opportunity to try to do something and do it right for a change in this county. We do the $10 million or whatever it is, you're right back to what we did in 1979 when we built the downtown jail. I've been on this board 9 years, been on the facilities committee close to 6 years. We're just we've listened to all the people. Well, we wanted visitation. We want classrooms. Because, Parkland College was going in, helping with GED and stuff. Well, we're missing this opportunity to get this done and do it right. Dustin and the previous sheriff have both asked for separation because they can't do it in the existing satellite even. We're missing an opportunity. I hear all the numbers. Well, you know what? The jail population accounts for about 1/10 of 1% of the total county population. That means 99+% of the people in this county are paying taxes, doing their jobs, and trying to live peacefully. We have people around here, and they've told me so. They're scared to go downtown Champaign after dark. Think of the businesses, the investments they've made in some nice restaurants and facilities downtown Champaign. Yes, they're paying property taxes, sales taxes. Oh, by the way, they're employing people. It's time this county do something and do it right. I've heard the story, well, we beat the tax deal. Well, anybody in this rural area hates a tax deal. But that 1/4 cent sales tax that was introduced, what year was it, 15 or 16? That was a total facilities tax for everything. Until Gary Maxwell and Dana Brenner sat down and got our 10-year plan, we were spending just over $500,000 a year on all our facilities, 22 buildings, I believe it is. That doesn't do anything. If this county doesn't start looking forward and doing something right, you're going to be right back here having the same bitches and moans and groans. We got people that won't come to work at our downtown facility, our corrections officers. We're offering incentives. We still don't have them filled. I haven't talked to Dustin or Carrie about that situation lately, but it's time to sit here and think about this $20 million. When I introduced the 10 million, that was the first half. It's time. That still leaves $21 million this county can spend on other issues in this county. And if you can't do something with $21 million, because money's not going to solve every problem. I'm going to relay a little story I heard just this past week hauling grain in. A black gentleman working part-time, 60 years old, got talking to him while we're dumping grain. And that's not an easy job. I asked him, where are you from? You from Champaign? He said, well, I've been here 2 years. I grew up on the West Chicago, Grant Park area. Oh, I said, okay, you got some stories. He said, yeah. And he's pointing out different areas. He said, well, you can go from this point to this point and to this point. But if you end up at that middle point, that's the hospital. You don't want to go there. I said, well, what's going on? He goes, you got all these youngsters. Most of them don't have an 8th grade education. The gangs have control of them, and they use the fear factor on the public. Now, I don't know if money's going to solve that problem. To me, it starts at home. But it's time for this county to do it the right way and get the sheriff's office and the consolidation and the renovations done the correct way. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any further questions or comments? Mr. McGuire?
I would just agree with Stan's comments that we need to fill a facility that fits the need. I think the staff in the jail, they have a big issue to deal with what they're currently dealing with, and it's going to be hard to attract more COs if we don't do what we need to do to serve this public the way we should, protect it. Thank you.
All right. Any more comments or questions? All right, moving on then to the next agenda item, which is the downtown jail closure and impact on satellite jail. Darlene.
So I just want to mention, Tammy mentioned, of course, that the bonding things that she talked about in the financing do not include the sheriff's office or some other needs that the county might have for public safety kinds of things. I do want to let the board know that there is a possibility for us to work out a situation for the sheriff's office that is fairly immediate and would be able to probably use almost entirely money that we just have available. As you know, we put aside $3.75 million for the purpose of getting started on some kinds of public safety, jail, et cetera projects, potentially engineering or other things, but could be used for the purpose of moving the sheriff. And that could be, that would be money that we don't then need to bond or do other things with. So just a thought. I know Dana also has potential plans that he showed you of different options. This is another option that's not on that list. And probably if we're going to talk about it, we'd need to go into closed session at some point. Not tonight, but I'm letting you know there's another option on the table.
Mr. Passalacqua.
Thank you. Would it be more prudent to use ARPA funds on the front side and use our surplus or our 3.5 million later because of the fact that we have time constraints on when that money can be spent, administered, or however you want to term that? But I'm grateful that we have that money set aside, but because of the workings of the requirements for the ARPA guidelines, would it be more prudent to use ARPA funds first?
Yeah, that's for, you're talking about for the jail construction or the jail consolidation piece? Yes. We had alluded in the last meeting about, we already had some funds sitting there that we could start engineering and so forth. And I think that's wonderful. My only point is, I'm no professional on the timeline or the requirements for how quickly the ARPA grant money needs to be used, but I don't want to forsake using some of the grant money just because we have some of that in reserve, because we will certainly need more. I'm just asking if it's more prudent to use our reserve on the back side instead of the front side. It depends on which plan you guys choose to do. So for example, we could use the 3.75 million to start with engineering and things like that and wait until we get the additional money next year, the 20 million that will be coming next year. Because we don't have that yet. We don't want to commit that until we actually have it in hand. So that was the thought, I think, going forward when we set up the budget originally. But the other part also is that we can do things with the money we have at hand right now, and that will help us move some other pieces. And we were not at that time considering the sheriff's office at all. In order to close the downtown facility, you're going to have to move both the jail and the sheriff. So it does need to be part of the conversation. And the other part is that you guys already talked about how you want to commit the ARPA money that we have currently received. There's approximately, how much was left, Tammy? How much was left in the budget that wasn't allocated?
You mean at the end of 2022?
Yeah. How much did we put in the budget under county board that was not allocated?
We would have a remaining $25 million at the end of 2022.
No, I mean in the 2022 budget that we actually, when the board decided. Yeah.
Maybe 4 million, roughly, off the top of my head.
That was not, you guys, when you guys went through your allocation, you allocated approximately 16 point something million into actual areas. We talked about different areas to put it in. And there was about approximately 4 million left over. That's not in any of those pots yet. So potentially we could use that to start with the jail or the sheriff's office move. If some of the sheriff's office could also be included in ARP, which I think it could, some of it, because they're pretty crowded and we're separating staff and things in the sheriff's office as well. But I'm just saying we could use that for the engineering on the jail and just start with that with ARPA money. So there's different ways we can do this, but I think we have to actually figure out what you guys would like to do and then try to figure out how the money would flow that's qualified to do everything and in the order it's needed to happen so that we get the money when we need it.
Jim?
Thank you. Yeah, Kyle. A couple of questions about that. When we say we have allotted 16 million, is 8 million of that the ARPA funding for the jail?
There was no money currently allocated in the ARPA budget that we talked about at the finance meeting. There's been no money specifically allocated for the jail at all at this point. The money
Yeah,
that we
like it's-
allocated, yeah, the money that was allocated for maybe engineering and things, you guys had said you probably wanted to start with that 3.75 million.
My concern is we have the $20 million of ARPA funding right now in the bank, but we don't have the next $20 million. And that, so that 20 million can change if we don't address this issue. So, we brought up that we couldn't, if this is a main priority, which I think it should be, it's not saying that we don't support social programs, which we do, but and this stuff is likely to start by the end of 2022, that we need to have that money available. Second part of the question is if we consolidate the jail offices and everything and change that, is it possible to sell that downtown jail, and is that money figured into the amount we might have available?
Sorry. So if we were to actually move the sheriff's office and all of the inmates, which currently also are not moved, let's say by mid-year next year, we could in fact then consider selling the property or trading the property for something else we need, or rent, those kind of things. But until it's totally vacant, we're not going to be able to do that.
All right, is anybody, or go on, Jim.
Sorry. I mean, it just seems like if we're talking about closing the downtown jail and moving everyone, but not yet confirming that we are going to use the ARPA funding or making the ARPA funding available, we can be stuck in a pretty bad position where we don't have jail space at the satellite and just have office space. That doesn't seem like a very good position to be in if we're not prepared by the end of the year. And when would we start talking about this funding? Will we move it from this committee meeting, or how will that process work?
So potentially you could use the existing 3.75 million to start with engineering, as we had talked earlier. Potentially we could move the sheriff's office with that money. And then when the engineering study is done, we will hopefully at that point, it'll be mid-year next year by all of the time those things happen. And we would be able to have the rest of the ARPA money, at which time that could be allocated. I don't think we can get either of moving the sheriff or moving the inmates or getting the engineering studies done before mid-year next year. So I think that we're fine doing the initial steps and then waiting to get the ARPA money for next year, assuming the board, of course, will allocate it at that point. If you don't, we're just going to be stuck right there at that point. But in order to commit, we probably need a plan of what we're all committing to do. And I'd be happy to bring more details. I know Dana gave you the scenarios for the different options of, we've already done the scenarios about potentially building out the gym area to make it into office space for the sheriff. We've talked about adding another pod, which was the original design for the jail consolidation, was also the sheriff's consolidation over there. Those are all different options with different price tags. The new option that I have does not have an exact price tag to it. Dana and I can work on that this week. But what I believe is that it will come in as the best cost for your buck. And it's doable fairly quickly, but I don't have all the exact numbers tonight. So we can do that at the next meeting, or I can bring it to the board. You can call another meeting, or however you want to do that. I just feel like if we're going to talk about actual property or things like that, we probably need to go into closed session.
Ms. Taylor.
This was kind of sparked by something that Darlene just said, and it's kind of a question for Dustin, actually. Is it even feasible to move the sheriff's office before we have a consolidated jail?
Well, so of course, the number one priority is the jail. But the problem we're having right now is the classification issues coupled with COVID protocols, which is why we haven't just simply taken all the inmates out of the downtown jail and sent them other places. So we're working through some of those things. One is gonna have to happen. I don't know. That's for you guys to decide. We're both going to have to move the satellite jails. I'm going to have to take on new inmates, or we're going to have to ship them out somewhere else. And the sheriff's office is going to have to get new space too. I was speaking with Darlene a little bit earlier, about options and things like that. And knowing a time frame, how fast things are going to work, things like that. Can we have all the inmates moved from the downtown jail by mid-year next year? I don't know. That Carrie doesn't know that either. That just a lot of things happen. We're trying our hardest with that. And there could be some opportunities to move the sheriff's office now. That could then vacate that top part. The other part of me says, why would we spend money in lease whenever we have money, or when we have space now for the sheriff's office? But we're also a day away from the roof caving in from the sheriff's office, or the HVAC system going down, or something like that. And so that's really what I hope you guys decide on, is a plan for both of them to move in a timely fashion.
Thank you.
Sheriff Harmon or Captain Vogus, maybe you could comment on this. What have you guys encountered difficulties with moving so I think it was about 70 people, around 775 that were in downtown jail that you guys were looking to move out of county. Have you experienced any sort of roadblocks, or, what have you learned in trying to move that many people at one time?
I know that so far we've actually had a couple roadblocks, because our plan was to simply move the downtown, those that are incarcerated downtown. But we have so many people currently being arrested for major gun violence and major crime that our focus has had to shift a little bit. But some of the things we're facing and things that people are realizing is it's harder and harder for the public defenders to actually reach their clients and meet with them. We've actually had some say they're not going to move. Is that kind of what you're asking, Kyle? Are those kind of barriers, or?
Yeah, just because how many are out of county currently?
Currently, we have 30. Actually, we just sent a couple of them to Department of Corrections. So we have 24 in DeWitt, and we have 20 in Kankakee, and we have another 20 leaving next week. So we'll end up with 70 out here by the end of next week. So the biggest issue for us is we don't have the staffing to staff the jail, let alone staff it to transport. So right now, every time we have additional people out of county, they may have to be transported back for court. So we're spending more money on gas to transport them back and forth, the staff to do it. And right now, so far, cross my fingers, we have the vehicles to use, but pretty soon, once I have a full 70 out, we may not necessarily have the amount of vehicles we need to get to DeWitt and to get to Kankakee, because we have two different locations along with our current facility. So there's quite a few hoops that we're realizing the more and more we get into this. But I did get an email the other day from Janie Miller with the public defender who says the difficulties they're finding to get to their clients and to make sure that they're getting what they need to do in order to bring their case to trial.
Kyle, I would just add that, when Carrie and I started thinking about this plan of, closing the downtown jail and moving the inmates out to other counties, I don't think we anticipated the flux of inmates that we would have now due to the gun violence. And so we've had to shift from, I'm a firm believer, looking at the numbers, I'm a firm believer that if we did not have a plan in place, we would still be housing out of county. This has nothing to do with the closing the downtown jail right this second, though we're trying to get as many inmates out of the downtown jail as we can. We would be housing out of county anyways, just because of our numbers and our classification issues and things like that right now. That's just something we didn't anticipate 3 months ago whenever we were coming up with this plan.
Yeah, it's shifted, Kyle, drastically from, we knew we had an HVAC project coming up where we were talking about having to move everyone out of a housing unit at the satellite jail, to COVID numbers increasing and the pandemic coming right back around to where we were, to the violence in the community. And Dottie and I know Ron kind of spoke on this because they really focus on the pretrial numbers. But the issue is we need to find out what those pretrial, the people that are in jail, what they're pending pretrial for. Majority of them are not going to get out. And the majority of them are still sitting in the jail, and we're sitting at a very high level of felony pretrial right now. So we are trying really hard to send individuals that have currently pending major crimes that have a court date that may be further out. So that way we're not transporting them back and forth as much. Those that could possibly post a bond, leaving them local. And also our other sheriffs do not want to take individuals that have mental health issues or medical issues. So those, unfortunately, again, stay with us as well at the Champaign County level.
Thanks for that update. That was very insightful. And thank you for, the work you guys are putting in. I know this is sounds like a very difficult sort of juggling act. And in the absence of a crystal ball, it makes it even more difficult. So thank you for the labor and I'm sure stress that's gone into trying to make this work. Is there any more discussion about the downtown jail closure and impact on the satellite jail? All right, and the next agenda item was a discussion of sheriff's office relocation. I feel like we've kind of blended the two discussions together. Does anybody have any comments on the sheriff's office relocation? And just as a reminder, Darlene has reminded us, when it comes to like specific discussions of lease or real estate transfers, that is something that we typically would discuss in closed session.
Kyle, this is Dana.
Mm-hmm.
I probably was the one responsible for putting this on the agenda. I do think that it is our responsibility to ensure that when we talk about consolidation of jail, that we don't lose sight that we need to consider also the sheriff's office relocation. I look at them as it's two parts to the puzzle, and we have shared a number of scenarios over the years about the sheriff's office. From here at Brookins, there's a couple of options potentially. There's renting space options, certainly in town. So you can look at dollar numbers. Building new space at the jail is the most expensive. Remodeling lease space is probably the least expensive. And it's even less expensive if we own it. However, the option for placing the sheriff in pod 400 of Brookins has a pretty good price tag on it. Keep in mind, we have to put in a second floor with a gym to create the approximately 20,000 square foot. An additional parking lot needs to be put in. That had a price tag of about $8 million. So it needs consideration and how it will be funded. I would also say that as we talk about that, we've got something that's coming up, and I apologize for bringing it up here, but we've got the Humane Society issue. They are leaving their property within a year. What that means for animal control, I'm not sure yet. We've got to work with Humane Society. They own the building, we own the property. It's up to us to be able to, can they sublease it? Do we want to procure it for our own animal control. Possibly just a greater master plan for facilities for the county is in order. But all those things should be kind of in play and consideration, and I apologize for muddying the waters with that, but those are things that are out there, as well as we've got issues at the courthouse, and we have a storage capacity that is maxed out for the circuit clerk, for all 3 floors of offices at the facility. We need offices for the public defender. So there's a lot of master planning that I think needs to be done as we talk and move forward. But certainly the sheriff's office relocation has got to be in the next sentence, right beyond consolidation.
Sheriff Harmon, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just kind of thinking out loud a little bit here, kind of about Leah's comment earlier. And then, I continue to stand behind, County Plaza, for an example, is a space that I've mentioned to you guys before. That's pretty convenient. I think it's relatively empty from what I've heard. The more details and stuff would probably, have to be had in the interim, but when we need to move anyways, because we're running out of space sheriff's office wise. We just don't have room to do what we adequately do. And, I do know that it's tempting to say we can save a couple $100,000 on a lease every year when we already have space. But then we also think of, if we take care of this cog in the wheel, then we have more flexibility to move the jail when we need to move the jail, or, we have an option. If we find a more permanent solution for the sheriff's office, we have an option to start getting into that groove of things, start getting our operations back up to normal, those types of things, because we know we're going to have to move anyways. And so that would just kind of be what I would add is we don't know what kind of space is going to be out there whenever we finally make the decision to move, and the sheriff's office has to be in Urbana. Because there's a lot of space around Champaign County, but by law, it has to be in Urbana. And so I think if we find a good deal, then it doesn't necessarily matter if we've moved one component or the other. I think if we find the right fit at the right time, then that's something that the board would really seriously need to consider on. Let's move at that point. So.
Sheriff, I will say the only bonus to you guys still being there, not to stop the momentum, the only bonus is that because we are so short-staffed, having you guys upstairs Monday through Friday, it does help us to have bodies available whenever we do have a crisis or if something happens. That's the only bonus to keeping you guys there at this point.
Sheriff, when you mentioned it has to be in Urbana, is that because Urbana is the county seat?
Correct.
All right. That seems like a silly old-timey law, but it is what it is. Mr. Pasalacqua?
I'd just like to reiterate what Stan said earlier, and especially in light of every testimony we've had tonight. I don't care what color your shirt is. We agree that this has to happen. And it would be awesome if this current board would be remembered for not kicking the can down the road like we've seen for many, many years. And I do think ARPA funds are a golden ticket. And to Mr. Beaupre's point, it isn't going to sit well with some people. But the sad fact is we're in dire need for lots of reasons. And even if we turn this into a utopian, there's still going to be a need for some people to be incarcerated. Hopefully less and less, and hopefully for short term, but it's a necessity and it's a requirement. And if the can just keeps getting kicked down the road, it's going to become more expensive. It's going to become more dangerous, and it's become a more unsavory place to live. And so I really hope that I'm part of a board that gets something done, and we're known for that, especially on the heels of a nasty nursing home scenario. So I have really high hopes that we can get this done, and that this group can be a really good, big part of that.
Mr. Summers?
the charge of this committee is to look at different scenarios. Tonight's charge is to look largely at funding options. We need to take this information back after our next meeting, and we will take this to the board, and hopefully we will have a decision in December. So I don't, excuse me, I don't see us as kicking the can down the road. We're following the path that we agreed to in terms of looking at different options and presenting it to the board.
All right, is anybody else? Mr. McGuire?
But I think after those comments, we're talking about trying to get this accomplished as soon as possible because this is a crisis, and making a decision in November, I'm not sure why that isn't possible, why we can't move this to the county board with the discussion that we're having to make sure we do move this quickly. Because people are talking about the downtown jail collapse, the roof, and moving all the people that we can't move out of county into the satellite jail if that's something like that does happen. And there's obviously not space to do that. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions? All right. Moving on to the next item is the date of the next meeting. Following the way that we've been doing it, I believe that's going to be November 3rd, Wednesday, November 3rd of 2021 at 6:30 p.m. All right, and on to the chair's report. And I guess I'd just like make a comment about the next meeting. As Mr. McGuire alluded to, I also think that we should be making a substantive recommendation to the county board at the November meeting to be discussed at the full board meeting that month. We know that we're in a situation with the jail where, you know, any day we could be in an absolute crisis. I mean, we could be presented with impossible scenarios. So, you know, I think it's important that we do take this issue up swiftly, but I also want us to make wise decisions. So I encourage all of the committee members to, you know, have conversations with your caucus members. Both of our caucuses will meet 2 times for the county board leading up to next month's jail facilities committee. So please have robust conversations in your caucuses this month about this topic and about what you think that you would like moving forward. Anybody, please reach out to me if you have any questions or want to discuss this. But you know, I encourage everybody next month to really kind of dig into this issue, and next month be prepared to you know, make a recommendation for the county board. All right. Seeing no other business, I'll call this meeting adjourned at 8:10. All right. Thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks to all the staff that worked late today to keep us informed tonight. Thank you.
Good night.